My name is Clara. I'm 25 years old. And for my entire life, my family treated me like the punchline to a joke I wasn't in on. I was the placeholder, the one they kept close enough to serve, but never close enough to count. But the moment that finally made it impossible to keep lying to myself came at my bridal fitting, just 48 hours before my wedding. My sister deliberately tilted her wrist, sending a full glass of dark red wine cascading down the front of my $14,200 custom silk gown. She didn't even pretend it was an accident. She just stared at the spreading stain, smirked, and whispered, "You really thought he would marry a loser like you?" 6 bridesmaids froze in front of the mirrors. My mother gasped, but her champagne glass stayed perfectly level. She didn't move a single muscle to help me. Always her golden child. Always my fault. I paid for the room. She got the attention. I thought I just had to swallow the humiliation to keep the peace. I was wrong. My sister had no idea about the audio recording I'd received 3 days earlier, sitting queued up on my phone at that exact second. Once that hidden truth came out, it wasn't just going to ruin a dress. It was about to tear apart 25 years of lies and completely destroy the pristine reputation she had built on my back. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. To understand how my sister felt comfortable enough to pour red wine on a $14,000 dress while my mother watched, you have to understand the rules of our house. 6 months ago, I called a family dinner to announce my engagement to Ethan. I had spent weeks picking the restaurant, a quiet Italian place with white tablecloths, thinking that a public setting would force my family to act like normal people. I was wrong. I barely got the word engaged out of my mouth before my mother's face shifted. She didn't ask to see the ring. She didn't ask how he proposed. She put her fork down, looked at my father, and then looked at Alina. Alina was staring at her lap, her lower lip trembling in that practiced way she's used since she was 6. "That's lovely, Clara," my mother said, her voice dropping into that low, dangerous tone she uses when she's about to demand a sacrifice. "But the timing is a bit selfish, don't you think? Alina just lost her position at the gallery. She's struggling, and here you are flaunting a diamond." Alina had lost that job because she stopped showing up on Mondays, but in our family myth, Alina is a star who just has bad luck. I am the stable one, the boring one, the one whose only job is to make sure the star doesn't stop shining. "It's not a celebration if the whole family isn't happy," my mother continued. "You have that large savings account from your promotion. If you're going to spend a fortune on a wedding, the least you can do is help your sister breathe. She's drowning in credit card debt, Clara. How can you walk down an aisle knowing she's being hounded by collectors?" I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just rearranged the salt and pepper shakers. This was the hierarchy. Alina is the fragile heart of the family, and I am the life support system. "How much?" I asked. I already knew I would pay. I always paid. 12,000 would clear her main lines, my mother said, not missing a beat. "It's a compromise. You give her that and we can all move forward with your little party." My wedding was a little party. Her debt was a family crisis. I wrote the check the next morning. I watched the money leave my account, money I had saved for our house down payment. When I told Alina, she didn't thank me. She just snatched the envelope and said, "It's about time you did something for someone else." My father nodded when he heard the debt was settled. To him, peace had been bought, and the price didn't matter because he wasn't the one paying it. He patted my shoulder once and said, "Good girl, family first." That was the first lie I told myself, that if I paid enough, they would finally let me be happy. A few days later, I was sitting on my sofa, crying quietly because I felt so hollow. Ethan came home and found me there. He didn't ask me why I'd given the money away. He already knew how they operated. He didn't lecture me. He just sat down, took my hand, and opened a small velvet box. Inside was a silver brooch, heavy and ornate, with a single clear stone in the center. "This belonged to my grandmother," Ethan said, his voice steady and warm. "She wore it on her wedding day. My parents wanted you to have it now." He pinned it to my sweater, right over my heart. "In our family, Clara, you will always come first. You don't have to buy your way into this house." It was the first time in 25 years I felt like I was allowed to exist without a price tag attached to my head. I touched the cool silver, and for a second I believed him. I believed that the family I was building would be stronger than the one I was leaving. I thought paying off Alina's debts would buy me a peaceful wedding planning experience. I thought that by clearing the board, she wouldn't have any reason to resent me. I was so wrong. A week later, I started receiving the first suggestions for the guest list. My mother wanted her bridge club invited. Alina wanted a front row seat for a friend she'd met 2 weeks prior. Every time I said no, the temperature in the house dropped. "You're becoming very difficult, Clara," my mother told me over the phone. "Ever since you got that ring, you've forgotten where you came from. We're trying to help you keep this family together, but you're making it very hard." I realized then that the $12,000 wasn't a gift to buy peace. It was a down payment on my obedience. And because I had paid it once, they expected me to keep paying until there was nothing left of me. That was the pattern. Alina breaks something and I fix it. Alina cries and I apologize. But this was my wedding. This was the one day I thought the rules might change. I held onto that silver brooch like a lucky charm, thinking it could protect me from the storm that was already gathering. The $12,000 was supposed to be a peace treaty. Instead, it was a green light. Once my mother realized I would pay to avoid a scene, she started treating my wedding like a buffet where she could grab whatever she wanted. The first real crack happened 3 months before the date. I had asked my college best friend, Sarah, to be my maid of honor. Sarah has been there for every breakup, every promotion, and every time my family made me feel like a ghost. She's the person who actually knows me. When I told my mother, the air in the kitchen went cold. She was folding laundry, but she stopped, a pair of my father's socks frozen in her hands. "You're joking," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I'm not, Mom. Sarah is my best friend." "Alina is your sister," she snapped, slamming the socks onto the table. "She's been through so much this year. Losing her job, the debt. She needs this win, Clara. She needs to be at the front. What is people going to think if the sister of the bride is just a regular bridesmaid? They'll think there's drama. They'll think you're being spiteful." "There isn't drama unless you make it," I said. My voice was shaking, but I stayed in my chair. "I love Alina, but Sarah is the one I want standing next to me." My mother didn't argue further that day. She just did that thing where she pinches her lips together and looks through you like you're a window. I thought that was the end of it. I thought, for once, I had set a boundary and it had held. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the florist. "Hi, Clara, I'm just calling to confirm the cancellation of the peony order," the woman said. "We've processed the refund to the original card on file." I felt the blood drain out of my face. "I didn't cancel anything." "Oh," the florist paused. "A woman calling herself the wedding coordinator, a Mrs. Miller, called this morning. She said the theme had changed and you wouldn't be needing our services anymore." My mother's maiden name is Miller. She used the refund from the flowers to buy Alina a designer dress for the rehearsal dinner. When I confronted her, she didn't even blink. "It's punishment for disrespecting blood," she said, sipping her tea. "If you want to act like Sarah is more important than your sister, then you can find your own flowers. I'm just helping you prioritize what actually matters. A wedding is about family, Clara, not your little friends." I realized then that she wasn't just opinionated. She was actively sabotaging the one day that was supposed to be mine because I wouldn't let her use it to prop up Alina. She had taken my money, and now she was taking my joy. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I moved the remaining wedding funds into a private account she couldn't touch. Then I called her back. "Mom," I said, my voice as cold as hers. "If you interfere with my plans one more time, if you call one more vendor or cancel one more chair, you won't be at the ceremony. I'll hire security to keep you out. Do you understand?" There was a long silence on the other end. No apology, no explanation. "You've become a very cruel woman, Clara," she whispered. Then she hung up. That was the first time I fought back. It felt like walking on broken glass, but for the first time I wasn't the one bleeding. I thought that by drawing a line, I had ended the war. I didn't realize that for my family, a boundary isn't a stop sign, it's a challenge. I spent the rest of the afternoon rebooking the florist and paying a rush fee I couldn't afford. My wedding wasn't a celebration anymore. It was a hostage negotiation. The family didn't wait long to strike back. Within 48 hours of my phone call to my mother, the phone calls started, not to me, but to Ethan's family. My sister, Alina, had always been a master of the concerned whisper. She started calling Ethan's aunts and cousins. She told them she was worried about Ethan. She spun a story that I had a history of being unstable, that I'd cheated on every boyfriend I'd ever had, and that the only reason I was rushing this wedding was because I'd burned through my savings and needed Ethan's family money to bail me out. I found out when Ethan's Aunt Martha called him, sounding breathless. "Ethan, dear, I just had the longest chat with Clara's sister. She's just so heartbroken. Is it true Clara forced her to pay off some debt before she'd let her be in the wedding party?" They had flipped the script. My $12,000 wasn't a sacrifice to help Alina. It was now a bribe I had extorted from her. Then came my father's call. He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired, which is his way of making me feel like I'm the one exhausting him. "Clara, just give her the title," he said. "Make her the maid of honor, be smart. You know how she gets when she feels left out. Why are you doing this? Why are you destroying the family over a label?" "She's lying to Ethan's family, Dad. She's telling people I'm a gold digger." "She's just hurt," he sighed. "If you apologize publicly, it all goes away. Just a small post on Facebook, maybe. Say you've been stressed and you're sorry for the tension. Do it for me, Clara. I can't have your mother crying in the kitchen every night." That was the price of my dignity, my mother's silence in the kitchen. I spent the next 3 days on the phone trying to perform damage control with people I barely knew. I explained the bank transfers. I explained the florist incident. I believed that if I just provided enough evidence, the truth would win. I thought logic was a shield, but you can't argue with a feeling. Alina had made them feel sorry for her, and no bank statement could fix a bad vibration. I watched as the RSVPs from Ethan's side started to slow down. One cousin texted to say they just couldn't make the travel work anymore. I was losing my reputation in real time. I was losing the respect of my new family before I'd even joined it. "Dad called for the third time that night," I told Ethan as we sat in our dark living room. "He said if I don't apologize to Alina by tomorrow, they aren't coming to the rehearsal dinner." I looked at my phone. My father had sent a draft of the apology he wanted me to post. It was 3 paragraphs of me taking the blame for misunderstandings and hormonal stress. I realized then that they didn't want a daughter. They wanted a scapegoat who was willing to sign her own name to the lies. The weight of it all finally broke me on a Tuesday night, 2 weeks before the wedding. I was sitting on my bedroom floor, surrounded by 300 wedding invitations that had been returned to sender or never even made it out of the house. My mother had promised to mail them using her special mailing list of family friends. Instead, she'd let them sit in a damp box in her garage until the stamps started to peel. She told me she forgot, but I saw the smirk she traded with Alina when I found the box. I felt like I was drowning in paper. I had spent thousands of dollars, lost half my guest list to Alina's whispers, and was being treated like a criminal by the people who raised me. I reached out to grab a stack of envelopes, and my hand just started shaking. I couldn't stop it. I pulled my knees to my chest and leaned my head against the cold wood of the bed frame. I was done. I told myself I would call Ethan and tell him to cancel the venue. We could go to the courthouse. We could go anywhere that wasn't here. I didn't want the dress anymore. I didn't want the cake. I just wanted the noise in my head to stop. The door creaked open. I didn't look up, assuming it was Alina coming in to offer a fake apology or ask for another loan. But it was Ethan. He didn't say a word. He didn't tell me to get up or ask what was wrong. He just sat right next to me on the floor, his shoulder pressing against mine. He picked up one of the ruined invitations, smoothed it out, and looked at it for a long time. "My cousin Sarah called today," he said quietly. "She said she heard you were only marrying me for the house. She said your sister called her crying about how much you've changed." I closed my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'll tell them it's off. You shouldn't have to deal with this." "Clara, look at me." I turned my head. He was holding my hand, and his grip was the only thing keeping me from drifting away. "They aren't our family," he said, his voice like iron. "We are our family. If your mother doesn't want to mail these, fine. If your sister wants to tell fairy tales, let her. Even if it's just the two of us standing in that church with the janitor as a witness, it will be a perfect day. Because I'm not marrying your family, I'm marrying you." He leaned over and kissed my forehead. For a few minutes, the room felt quiet again. The invitations were just paper. The lies were just air. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, putting on the playlist we'd made for our first dance. That was the floor. I had hit it, and I hadn't shattered. I realized that as long as I had Ethan, my family had no power to actually destroy my life. They could only destroy the version of it they had built in their own heads. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and reached for my laptop on the nightstand. I looked at the box of ruined invitations. Then I looked at the list of people Alina had called. If they wanted a war, they chose the wrong bride. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I was going to let them play their game until they ran out of breath. The rumors didn't just stay in the family. They grew legs and ran. By the week of the wedding, the poison Alina had been dripping into people's ears had become a full-blown social contagion. It started with the bridesmaids, the ones who were cousins on my mother's side. They stopped responding to the group chat. When I asked for their final shoe sizes for the gifts I'd bought, the silence was deafening. One of them finally replied with a single-word text. "Busy." No emoji. No "can't wait." Just the cold wall of people who had already decided I was the villain of the story. Then, the venue owner called me. He sounded nervous. "Clara, I had a woman calling from your mother's number asking about the process for transferring the rental agreement. She said there had been a change in the bride's circumstances. I told her I couldn't do that without your signature, but I wanted to make sure everything was okay." My mother was trying to take the entire venue and give it to Alina for a belated birthday party on my wedding date. They weren't just trying to ruin my day anymore, they were trying to overwrite it. By the time I walked into the elite bridal salon for my final fitting, the air felt heavy. This was the return to the moment where everything finally broke. I stepped into the VIP room, and the temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. 6 bridesmaids were standing around the perimeter, clutching glasses of water or champagne, but nobody looked at me. They were looking at their phones, or the floor, or the molding on the ceiling. The silence was tactical. It was designed to make me feel small. My mother was sitting in a velvet armchair in the corner. She didn't stand up when I walked in. She didn't smile. She pointedly turned her head to look out the large window at the street below, as if the traffic was more interesting than her daughter in a wedding gown. And then there was Alina. She was standing in the center of the room, already holding a tall glass of heavy Cabernet. She looked glowing, smug, and entirely in control of the room's energy. She had spent the last hour telling the bridesmaids how difficult I had been about the dress, how I'd made the seamstress cry, and how I was stressed because Ethan was having second thoughts. "Oh, look," Elena said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "The bride has arrived. Everyone try to look happy or she'll start a scene again." A couple of the bridesmaids let out a sharp, jagged laugh. My mother didn't turn around. I ignored her. I went into the changing room and let the assistant help me into the gown. It was $14,200 of custom silk, and for the 3 minutes I spent looking at myself in the mirror, I felt like the woman Ethan saw. It was perfect. It was the only thing in my life right now that wasn't touched by their rot. I stepped back out onto the pedestal. The room stayed silent. No one gasped. No one told me I looked beautiful. Elena walked closer, swirling the dark red wine in her glass. She was smiling, but her eyes were flat and hard. She looked at the dress, then up at my face. "It's a lot of dress for a girl who's probably going to be stood up," she whispered, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Elena, back off," I said. My voice was steady. "Or what? You'll cut me out. You already tried that, Clara, but look around. Nobody here is on your side." And then she raised her glass. She looked me dead in the eye, a look of pure, calculated malice crossing her face. She didn't stumble, she didn't trip. She slowly, deliberately tilted her wrist. I watched the red liquid leave the glass in slow motion. It hit the white silk like a gunshot. The stain spread instantly, deep and purple, soaking through the layers of the skirt. "Oops," she whispered. "I guess you're just unlucky, Clara." The room froze. My mother didn't move a muscle to help. She just kept looking out the window. I stood there in the middle of the bridal salon, shivering under the weight of the wet, purple-soaked silk. The wine was cold, but the silence from the bridesmaids was colder. Elena was still smirking, her eyes darting around the room to make sure everyone saw her handiwork. My mother finally turned from the window, but not to help me. She looked at the stain and sighed, as if my ruined dress was a personal inconvenience to her afternoon schedule. "Well," my mother said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "Clearly, you're too emotional to finish the fitting today. Elena, let's go. I think we've all had enough drama for one day." They walked out. The bridesmaids followed them like a pack of silent ghosts, leaving me alone on the pedestal. I felt like a broken statue. I reached up to unclip the silver brooch Ethan had given me, my fingers shaking so hard I almost dropped it. "Don't take that off," a voice said. I looked up. It was Agatha, the owner of the salon. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every possible version of human ugliness. She hadn't said a word during the incident, but now she was moving toward me with a thick, plush blanket. She wrapped the blanket around my shoulders and helped me step down from the pedestal. "Come with me, honey," she whispered. She led me into her private office in the back. It smelled like expensive tea and old cedar. She sat me down in a leather chair and disappeared for a moment, returning with a steaming mug. "Drink," she commanded. "It's got enough sugar to jumpstart a heart." I took a sip. The warmth started to thaw the ice in my chest. "The dress is ruined," I whispered. $14,000, it's gone." Agatha sat across from me, her expression unreadable. "Honey, I've been making dresses for 30 years. I've seen mothers try to sabotage their daughters' waistlines and sisters try to trip brides on the stairs. You can spot trash instantly, even if it's dressed in silk." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small, silver flash drive. She tapped it against the desk. "I've had 3 high-end tiaras stolen in the last decade," Agatha said. "So I installed a very expensive security system. Cameras with high-definition microphones. There's one hidden in the molding of the VIP room, right above the mirror where your sister was standing while you were in the changing room." She pushed the flash drive across the desk toward me. I went back and checked the footage while you were sitting here, she said. Your sister and your mother. They didn't know the microphones could pick up a whisper. You need to hear what they said when they thought you couldn't hear them. I looked at the silver drive. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Why are you giving this to me? Agatha leaned forward, her face softening for the first time. Because I had a mother like yours once. I spent 20 years trying to earn a love that didn't exist. I don't want to see you waste 20 minutes more. She patted my hand. It was the first genuine touch I'd felt from another woman in months. I took the flash drive and walked out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, the ruined gown stuffed into a garment bag in the back, and plugged the drive into my laptop. The file was crystal clear. I saw Alina leaning in close to my mother while I was behind the curtain. I heard the rustle of their silk and then Alina's voice, sharp and predatory. I've got the wine ready, Alina whispered on the tape. And after the dress is trashed, I'm going for the gift envelopes at the rehearsal dinner. I already took the 10,000 from the early arrivals. Clara's too stupid to even notice they're missing. My mother's laugh echoed through my car speakers, a thin, brittle sound. She deserves it for trying to act like she's better than us. And Ethan, he'll be looking for an exit once he sees what a mess she is. You make sure you're there to catch him, Alina. I closed the laptop. My hands were perfectly still now. The pain didn't go away, but the confusion did. For 25 years, I had been trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces were designed not to fit. Now I saw the whole picture. They didn't just want my money or my dress. They wanted my life. I picked up my phone and called Ethan. I didn't cry. I didn't vent. Ethan, I said, I need you to talk to your AV team for the rehearsal dinner. I have something I want to play for the guests, and I need it to be loud. I heard what was never meant for my ears, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what to do with the truth. I sat in my car in the salon parking lot for an hour, the audio file looping over and over. Hearing my mother's brittle laugh after Alina called me too stupid to notice, the missing $10,000 felt like a physical weight leaving my chest. For years, I had wondered why I couldn't reach them, why every olive branch I extended was snapped in half. Now I knew. You can't reach people who are busy digging a pit for you to fall into. The leverage wasn't just a recording, it was a map of their entire operation. I didn't call my mother to scream. I didn't text Alina to demand the money back. I became very quiet and very strategic. I went home and pulled every bank statement from the last 6 months. I highlighted the $12,000 I'd paid for Alina's debt, the flower deposit my mother had stolen, and the missing $10,000 from the early wedding gifts. I scanned them all into a single folder. Then I called Ethan. I have it, I said. I have everything. We met at a small diner far from our neighborhood. I played the recording for him. I watched his jaw tighten as Alina talked about catching him once I was out of the picture. He didn't look shocked, he looked disgusted. They really think I'm part of the prize, Ethan said, his voice low. They think everyone is a character in their play, I replied. But the script is changing. We spent the evening with his friend Mark, who runs a high-end event production company. Mark is the one handling the AV for our rehearsal dinner. I showed him the file from Agatha's salon. Can you clean up the background noise? I asked. I want every word to land. Mark put on his headphones, worked some magic on his laptop, and then played a snippet back. Alina's voice was now crisp and clear, sounding like she was standing right next to us. I already took the 10,000. She's too stupid to even notice. I can tie this into the main house speakers, Mark said. I'll set it up as a tribute video from the bride. When you give me the signal during your toast, I hit play. It'll override every other microphone in the room. I felt a cold sort of peace. I wasn't being reactive anymore. I wasn't the wounded girl on the bedroom floor. I was a woman taking inventory of her life. I moved the rest of my jewelry and important documents into a safety deposit box that next morning. I didn't leave a trail. When my mother called to complain that the replacement dress I'd found was tacky and cheap, I just agreed with her. "You're right, Mom," I said. "It's nothing compared to the first one." "Well, at least you're finally learning your place," she snapped before hanging up. I looked at the red circle on my calendar. 48 hours until the rehearsal dinner. I let them keep their confidence. I let Alina keep spending the money she'd stolen. I let my mother believe she had finally broken my spirit. I was no longer fighting for their approval. I was just waiting for the clock to run out. The night of the rehearsal dinner arrived with a heavy, humid heat. I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, wearing a simple navy blue wrap dress. It cost $80. It was a far cry from the silk gown currently sitting in a garbage bag in my trunk, but I had never felt more like myself. I pinned Ethan's grandmother's silver brooch to my collar. It felt like a shield. Alina, meanwhile, was in peak form. When I walked into the private dining room of the restaurant, she was already there, positioned right by the entrance. She was wearing a floor-length white lace gown, a literal wedding dress in everything but name. She was holding a martini and laughing loudly with my mother's bridge club. "Oh, Clara," she said, her voice carrying across the room as she looked at my simple dress. "I'm so glad you decided to go for something manageable. After that whole mess at the salon, we all thought you'd be too embarrassed to show your face." She patted my arm, her eyes scanning the room to make sure everyone saw her being the bigger person. She looked victorious. She looked like she had already won the war. My mother was sitting at the head of the table next to my father. She gave me a tight, pitying smile. "Sit down, Clara. We're about to start the toasts. Try not to look so morose, it's a celebration." I took my seat next to Ethan. He reached under the table and squeezed my hand. I looked toward the back of the room, where Mark was adjusting the soundboard near the bar. He caught my eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. The confidence in the room was suffocating. Alina was whispering to Ethan's cousins, likely more lies about my instability. My father was laughing at a joke one of the uncles made, oblivious to the fact that the checkbook in his pocket had been bled dry by the girl he was currently beaming at. "I'm just so happy I could be here for her," I heard Alina tell a guest nearby. "Even after how she's treated us. Family is everything, you know." She actually wiped a fake tear from the corner of her eye. It was a master class in performance. She didn't know that the stage was about to collapse. Dinner was served, salmon and asparagus that I couldn't taste. My mother stood up and gave a short, biting speech about how growth comes from struggle, and how she hoped I would finally find peace in my new marriage. It was a backhanded toast designed to remind everyone that I was the problem child. Alina went next. She stood up, her white dress shimmering under the chandeliers. She spoke for 10 minutes about her bond with me, about how she'd always been my protector, and how she'd forgiven me for the recent tensions. By the time she sat down, half the room was looking at me with disapproval and the other half was looking at her with adoration. She leaned over to me as the applause died down. "See," she whispered. "Everyone loves a star, Clara. You're just the stagehand." I stood up. My heart was steady. I didn't feel the shaking that had plagued me for months. I reached for the microphone. "I'd like to say a few words," I said, smiling widely at my sister. "I have a special tribute for the family that made me who I am today." I looked at Mark. I raised my glass. "I want everyone to hear the truth," I said, "directly from the source." The room was exactly as my mother had designed it: candlelight, white lilies, and 100 people from the right social circles. Everyone was looking at me, expecting a humble thank you or a tearful goodbye to my maiden name. Alina sat back in her white lace dress, looking like a queen who had just consolidated her power. My mother had her wine glass halfway to her lips, a smug, satisfied expression on her face. "I have a tribute," I repeated, my voice booming through the speakers. "But before we look at the memories, I want to talk about costs. Because everything in this family has a price, doesn't it? I looked directly at my father. He looked confused, his fork hovering over his salmon. I paid $12,000 to clear a debt for a sister who told everyone I was a gold digger, I said. The room went quiet. Not a polite quiet, but a shocked, air-leaving the room silence. I paid for a wedding dress that my sister ruined with red wine 48 hours ago while my mother watched and laughed. And I wondered why. I wondered what I had done to deserve a family that treats my life like a bargain bin. Clara, that's enough, my mother hissed, standing up. Her chair scraped harshly against the floor. You're embarrassing yourself. Sit down. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed, Mom, I said. I looked toward the back of the room and nodded. Suddenly, the overhead speakers crackled. A sharp digital hum filled the air, and then Alina's voice filled the room. It was loud. It was clear. It was undeniable. I've got the wine ready, the recording began. Alina's voice sounded like it was coming from the ceiling, from the walls, from everywhere. And after the dress is trashed, I'm going for the gift envelopes at the rehearsal dinner. I already took the 10,000 from the early arrivals. Clara's too stupid to even notice they're missing. The sound of my mother's brittle, mocking laugh followed, echoing through the crystal chandeliers. She deserves it for trying to act like she's better than us. And Ethan, he'll be looking for an exit once he sees what a mess she is. The room transformed in an instant. I watched the faces. Ethan's Aunt Martha dropped her dessert spoon. It hit the china with a sharp clink that sounded like a gunshot. Two of the bridesmaids, the ones who had been ignoring my texts, looked at their laps, their faces flushing deep red. Alina didn't move. She looked like she had been turned to stone, her hand still frozen around her martini glass. The smirk was gone, replaced by a raw, naked terror. My mother's reaction was different. She didn't look ashamed. She looked around the room to see who was watching. She reached for the microphone on the table, her knuckles white. This is a fabrication. This is some digital trick. Clara is unstable, we told you. It's from the security system at the bridal salon, Mom, I said into my own mic, cutting her off. Agatha gave it to me. She has the video to match. Would you like everyone to see that next? I have the bank statements for the missing 10,000 too. It matches the cash deposit Alina made into her personal account yesterday morning. The silence that followed was absolute. And then my father stood up. He didn't stand up to defend my mother. He didn't stand up to yell at me. He stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on Alina, then on my mother. He looked like a man who had just woken up in the middle of a house fire and realized he was the one who had been holding the matches. He looked at my mother with absolute, bone-deep disgust. He didn't say a word to her. He reached into her designer purse, which was sitting on the table, and pulled out her leather-bound checkbook. He walked around the table, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood. He stopped in front of Alina. In total silence, he dropped the checkbook right into her lap on top of her white lace dress. You wanted the money so badly, my father said, his voice cracking but clear. Take it, take all of it, but don't you ever call me Dad again. He turned and walked toward the exit. He didn't look back at the room, the guests, or the wife he had spent 30 years following. He just pushed open the heavy oak doors and vanished into the night. The silence stretched. Alina started to sob, a jagged, ugly sound that had no grace in it. My mother sat back down, her face pale and old, looking at the checkbook in Alina's lap as if it were a poisonous snake. One by one, guests started to stand up. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't offer condolences. They just picked up their coats and walked out. Ethan's family went first, their faces set in grim lines of disappointment. By the time the recording looped back to the sound of my mother's laugh, the room was half empty. I think we're done here, Ethan said, standing up and taking the microphone from my hand. He looked at my mother and Alina one last time. Don't bother coming to the wedding. There won't be a seat for either of you. We walked out together. As we passed the head table, I saw the checkbook slide off Alina's lap and hit the floor. The wedding was 2 days later, and it was the quietest day of my life. There was no mother helping me into my dress. There was no sister making a scene. We had hired 2 off-duty police officers for the parking lot, but they mostly just stood in the sun and drank bottled water. Alina and my mother had tried to drive up an hour before the ceremony, but when they saw the security, they didn't even get out of the car. They sat in the gravel drive for 10 minutes before turning around and disappearing back the way they came. I stood in front of the mirror in a new dress. It wasn't $14,000. It was a simple, off-the-rack white gown that Agatha had stayed up all night to alter for me. On the collar, Ethan's grandmother's silver brooch caught the light, steady and bright. "You look like yourself," Sarah said, adjusting my veil. She was my only bridesmaid now. The others had sent apologetic texts, but I didn't respond. I didn't need people who only stood by me when the wind was blowing in the right direction. The ceremony was small, 40 people instead of 200. But as I walked down the aisle and saw Ethan waiting for me, I realized I wasn't looking for anyone else. My father wasn't there to give me away. I walked myself down that aisle, and it was the most powerful thing I've ever done. The fallout was permanent. Alina was forced to move 2 states away after Ethan's relatives, who had ties to the gallery world, made sure everyone knew she was a thief. My mother is still in the big house, but she's alone. My father filed for divorce a month after the rehearsal dinner. He sends me a text every Sunday now. It's always short. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see. I love you." I'm not ready to see him yet. Maybe I never will be, but I can finally breathe. I kept the original dress. It's sitting in a box in my closet. A few weeks ago, I took it out. The red wine stain has faded to a dull, rusty brown like an old wound. I didn't wash it. I didn't try to save it. I just packed it up and sent it to my mother via courier with a short note. "Take your debts. I'm starting a new tab. I'm Clara. I'm 25. And I'm finally no longer the punchline to someone else's joke." I have one question for you all. If you were in that room, would you have played that recording in front of everyone, or would you have just walked away and let them keep their secrets? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe for more. If you want to hear another story about a family that pushed too far, check out the video on the screen now about the girl who found out her parents had been hiding a secret bank account in her name for 20 years. Take care of yourselves.